Welcome, it is Mitch. I'm on YouTube. If you haven't already, please subscribe to the channel as we try to build this thing up. The goal is 1,000 subscribers by the end of the Packers season. As always, appreciative of all the support. It takes 4 seconds to click the subscribe button, so please do that. Final thoughts, Packers-Cowboys Sunday Night Football in Jerry World. A full breakdown of the contest, what to expect, all phases of the game. The Packers have won 10 of the last 11 meetings in, you could call it a rivalry. Definitely a rivalry. Outside of the division, Packers-Cowboys, definitely a rivalry. Packers have won 10 of the last 11. They're 5-0 in Jerry World, 6-0 if you include the Super Bowl win over Pittsburgh. Green Bay in the last 5 wins, or in the 5 wins at AT&T Stadium against the Cowboys, have scored at least 34 points in all of those matchups, including the playoff win in 2023, which was Jordan Love's first playoff start. Green Bay won that game 48-32. Let's start with the Dallas offense for this, because there's a huge missing piece for Dallas on Sunday night in the form of all-pro caliber wide receiver CeeDee Lamb, who will miss the matchup. It's huge. There's no understating that or underplaying it. The Cowboys not having CeeDee Lamb is massive. So now you elevate George Pickens to the wide receiver 1 spot, and it's not a foreign concept or a foreign position for Pickens to be in when he was in Pittsburgh before coming over to the Cowboys this offseason. Pickens was the wide receiver 1 for a couple of years for the Steelers. So it's not as though elevating Pickens to that, anointed WR1 spot is going to be something that catches him off guard, more attention, maybe more matchups with the Packers' number 1 cornerback in Keyshawn Nixon, maybe more targets coming his way via Dak Prescott, more plays drawn up where he's the primary option or the focal point for the Cowboys offense. That's something that Pickens was very comfortable with when he had to wear that hat in Pittsburgh. The problem I see with CeeDee Lamb being out is not George Pickens now being the wide receiver 1 for this game on Sunday night. The problem is the domino effect that it has, because you elevate George Pickens to the top spot on the totem pole for the wide receiver depth chart for Dallas. What does that do for the players behind him, and what sort of depth do the Cowboys have? That's where I see the problem really arising, because if we just zone in on the wide receiver group and you say, well, who's the secondary pass catcher now? I look outside of that group for that, and I look at tight end Jake Ferguson. Ferguson is the likely target to be the secondary piece on offense. Might end up having more targets, more receptions than George Pickens. But if we're lining this thing up, George Pickens is now the wide receiver 1 Sunday night for Dallas. And if you talk about who should get the most targets or the second most targets, you're probably going to zone in on tight end Jake Ferguson. He's coming off a game last week. This is insane numbers for anyone, wide receiver, tight end. 14 targets, 13 receptions for Jake Ferguson. He was only able to turn it into 82 yards. Like, usually if you have 13 receptions in a game, you're going well over 100 yards. Ferguson only had 82 against Chicago, but did have 14 targets. That's a key number to circle and remember. Ferguson's first among all tight ends with 27 receptions so far this year, former Wisconsin Badger. I will say this, Ferguson, if you remember, back in the 2023 playoff game against the Packers, he had 10 receptions, 93 yards, and not 1, not 2, but 3 touchdowns. Now, it was a blowout win for Green Bay. The final score is 48-32. The Packers led that wild card game 27-0 in Jerry World, and it felt over by halftime unless there was some, huge catastrophic collapse coming for the Packers, which never happened. But Ferguson did have a big game, and you can say, well, Green Bay led by so much, they were willing to give up stuff underneath. That's fine if you want to take that angle. Ferguson still had a good game. 10 receptions, 93 yards, and 3 touchdowns. The one caveat I would add to that is that it was a Joe Barry-led defense. This is a Jeff Hafley-led defense now, and it is very, very different in Green Bay. And we have seen that last year, and we have certainly seen it this year with the aggressiveness, the different looks, pressing at the line of scrimmage instead of having your corners 20-25 yards off the line, which was growing very old very quickly in the Joe Barry era. Different discussion for a different day. Point being, Ferguson should be the top or secondary target in the passing game for Dallas on Sunday with CeeDee Lamb out. Just a small sample size, but you look at what he did in Green Bay in the 2023 playoff game. He found means of success, but again, that was with Barry as the DC. Now there's Hafley running the show. The Cowboys as a whole, if you kind of want to zoom out the microscope and look at the offense, it's somewhat of like it's an enigma so far, the Dallas offense. If you look at week 2 against the Giants, they lit the world on fire. The Cowboys scored 40 points and had 478 yards of total offense. They had to escape with a win in overtime because of how bad the defense was and is, and we'll get to that a little later on down the road. But the offense in week 2 against the Giants, 40 points, 478 yards, and a win. And so if you bundle all the 3 games, which, again, is still a somewhat small sample size, but now we're almost a fourth of the way through the regular season. And so if you take the 3 games for the Cowboys so far this year, you can look at it through one prism and say, hey, they're 4th in total yards and 10th in scoring. But that week 2 tilt against the Giants doesn't just carry some of the weight, it carries all of the weight. Dallas looked okay offensively against Philadelphia, and that's not much of a Dallas problem. That's just how good the Eagles' defense typically is. And Dallas looked pretty pedestrian at best last week against the Chicago defense that just gave up a 50 spot to the Detroit Lions the week before. And so if you take out that Giants game, which of course we can't, but I'm merely suggesting that the overall numbers for Dallas are a bit misleading on offense, only because of how good it was against the Giants and how it was against Philadelphia in a Chicago defense that has a lot of question marks. But if you took out that Giants game, Dallas would be 28th in points per game. But they're not, because they scored 40 against the G-Men, and they're 10th in scoring and 4th in total yards. And I'll say that I like Dak Prescott. I like Dak Prescott a lot. I think Dak Prescott gets wildly misrepresented in the national media. Now, I don't have, my boots on the ground to see how he's portrayed or often talked about in the Dallas media market, but nationally it seems like Dak Prescott far too often is like the butt of the joke. And I would point at the Cowboys organization as a whole and say there's a lot of miscommunication isn't the right word, but there's a lot of almost like borderline chaos going on in Jerry world with Jerry Jones. And, they do things a little bit differently. Like Jerry Jones talks to the media on a weekly basis, lets his feelings be known. Like not many owners, if any owners in the NFL are doing that, especially none of them are doing it on a weekly basis. And Jerry Jones just, he's running the team as the owner, basically, has his son involved too, but Jerry's pushing a lot of the buttons as the de facto GM for the Cowboys too. And it's just, it's run differently. And so I think if you're on the national stage and you're making jokes about Dak Prescott, maybe I just want it because I would more so aim them towards kind of the Cowboys as a whole. And I'm not saying they should be the butt of all these jokes, but Dak Prescott to me does get misrepresented in the national media. And again, I don't have quite I don't have a pulse on the local media in Dallas to know how they view Dak, but nationally it seems like he gets ripped on a lot more than he should, because I think Dak's a pretty damn good quarterback. And so you kind of just have to ask, like, the national perspective and how they try to get us to view Dak Prescott. Is it because he's in Dallas? Is it because there's a lack of playoff success? Like, both of those probably play some sort of factor, but there's a hell of a lot of teams in the NFL that would sign up to have Dak Prescott as its starting quarterback. There's no doubt about that. And so even without CeeDee Lamb, which is a major, major hit for the Cowboys offense, if you're Dallas, I think you feel like you have a chance in this game just because you do have Dak Prescott, and he has shown a capability in the past. Like, Dak Prescott can win shootouts, and if they beat the Packers on Sunday, they're going to have to score, I would imagine, a lot of points, because we can dive right into this now. We'll segue into the Green Bay offense. I as bad as it was last week for the Packers offense, and they had 25 pass attempts and 5 sacks taken, I don't see that being in store for Sunday night. I don't think it's a repeat performance. There are major questions on the offensive line. We'll get to that in a couple of minutes. The Packers know they have to be better. You just have to ask yourself, are they more likely to be that team that scored 10 points against the Browns and collapsed at the end? They were up 10-0 with less than 4 minutes to go, and then they gave up touchdown field goal. Are they more likely to be that team in that offense, or are they more likely to be that team in that offense that we saw against Detroit? Week 1 put up 27 points, and against Washington in week 2 put up 27 points. Maybe there's some middle ground within that, but I think it's an extreme to expect that what we saw last Sunday will be how the Packers offense looks going forward, especially with what's on their plate Sunday night against the Dallas defense that has been completely carved up in all 3 weeks so far this NFL season. If you're the Packers, like, you just know with the ground game, it has to be better. A lot of the talk this week circulated around the Jordan Love interception, and that's fine, and the passing game, and a lack of explosive plays against a really good Cleveland Browns defense. I don't expect anyone to go back and watch the final thoughts video that I did last week before the matchup between Green Bay and Cleveland. But if you did watch it, I said many times, like, the only way I see Green Bay losing this game, talking about the one against the Browns, is if they make egregious mistakes offensively. Because I said the Browns defense is really good, but their offense is that bad. And Green Bay made a couple egregious mistakes, the Love interception, the Brandon McManus block kick. But if we want to circle one thing that's been pretty alarming all 3 weeks, not just 1 week, because Jordan Love was pretty good against the Lions. Jordan Love was pretty damn good against Washington, and then he had that clunker of a game against Cleveland and the really bad decision in the fourth quarter on the interception. But one thing that's been constant in a not-so-good light for Green Bay in all 3 games, in my opinion, has been the ground game. And you're already looking at a situation where you're going to be without Zach Tom at right tackle, and so it kind of puts you behind the 8 ball a little bit. But the running game has to get going at some point. And as bad as the Dallas defense has been, the run defense hasn't been awful. I will say, if you're viewing this glass half full for Green Bay, it should certainly be easier against Dallas's defense to get Josh Jacobs going than it was against Cleveland when he had 16 carries for 30 yards. But it's not going to be a cakewalk. And if you look back at the numbers or just watch the tape against Detroit and Washington, like, Josh Jacobs was able to rack up more yards against both those teams, but they are hard-earned yards for Josh Jacobs. And there's a number that I saw, or a stat that I saw, that really shines a light on the rushing offense for Green Bay and how bad the run blocking's been for the Packers. This came via Zach Cruz on Twitter. And again, I think it really puts a light on how rough things have been for the ground game for Green Bay. There are 8 running backs, folks. 8 running backs in the NFL so far this year with at least 160 yards running or rushing after first contact. 8 of them have at least 160 yards rushing after first contact is made by the defense. Jacobs is one of those 8. The other 7 all have over 5 yards per pop. Jacobs is at 3.1 yards per carry. Now, to bundle a little bit more perspective on that for you, Jacobs is at 3.1 yards per pop this year. Last year, his first year in Green Bay, he averaged 4.4 yards per tote. His career average entering this season was 4.3. So in a 7-year career, 4.3. Last year, 4.4. So right in line with each other. This year, 3.1 yards per carry. And if you're circling, hey, Josh Jacobs, what's going on? He's a problem. A lot of it is the big boys up front not paving avenues of success in the ground game. If you want, Josh Jacobs has to get, if we're splitting up a blame pie into sections, and hey, what percentage goes to Josh Jacobs? What's going to the play calling? What's going to the offensive line? Like, Josh Jacobs is going to get some of the blame pie because he is the running back, and it just comes with the territory. But this offensive line is not paving holes in the ground game. And Josh Jacobs averaging 3.1 per pop, not good for the Packers. And I don't want to get too deep into a lot of the numbers for the Cowboys defense because I'm sure there's at least some of you who watched my Eberflus versus LaFleur video that I put out on Wednesday, and I really, really did a deep dive into the Dallas defense and all the issues that they have had, that it has had so far this year. I'm trying to find the one. Yeah, here's the stat that I gave in that video, one of the many. The Cowboys allowed 137 rushing yards per game last year, and this year it's at 110. So that's 27 yards fewer per game than they were allowing last year. And that sounds really good, but they're still only 17th in the NFL this year, allowing 110 rushing yards per game. Last year ranked 29th, though, so there is some improvement. And I think a lot of that, honestly, can be pointed at Kenny Clark. Like, you add Kenny Clark to the interior of your defensive line. I know they lost Micah Parsons, but Kenny Clark is going to help your run defense immensely. And he's going to do things that don't show up in the statistically, right? Like, he's going to clog lanes, clog avenues that the offensive line's trying to carve out for their running game, for their running back. And a lot of that doesn't show up because he's not getting the tackle. There's no stat for, hey, he closed down this potential lane, and it really caused havoc for the offense trying to figure it out. It basically shut down the play. And so Kenny Clark has added that boost to Dallas's run defense, but they're still only 17th in the NFL. So if you're Green Bay, it's like Cowboys' run defense has improved from last year, but it's still middle of the pack, and it's a far cry from what we saw against Cleveland. Again, I'm viewing this through the Packers' perspective, and it's a far cry from what we saw last week against the Browns, who have the number 1 rush defense in the National Football League, and they're number 1 in total yards allowed so far this year in the National Football League. And so there has to be a breaking point for Green Bay where the two roads come together, and it's just you have to choose your path. Like, they come together and they break off again, and it's like, are we just going to be pedestrian and run blocking all year? Or are we going to figure this shit out and get Josh Jacobs going? And a good starting point is against this Dallas defense going into the bye week. And so I think it's critical for the Packers to try to get the ground game going, because the passing game looked really good against Detroit. The passing game looked really good against Washington. The passing game was horrible just against Cleveland. The running game looked meh against Detroit. It looked not great against Washington. It looked horrendous against Cleveland. That's a 3-week pattern in the ground game compared to a 1-game hopeful outlier in the passing game, which came last week against the Browns. And sticking with the offensive line, by the way, Mitch, I'm on YouTube. Please subscribe if you haven't already. It takes 3 seconds to click the subscribe button. Always appreciative of all the support. The pass protection was the run blocking has been pretty spotty all season long. The pass protection was otherworldly, horrific, terrifying, bad last week. And so you kind of bundle this all together for the offensive line, and it's been tough sledding. And if you're kind of looking ahead to this weekend, the offensive line could be in shambles again from an injury perspective. Zach Tom is not playing Sunday. He played 1 snap against Cleveland, left, didn't return. Zach Tom is not playing Sunday. It is unlikely that Aaron Banks plays on Sunday. Now, those were the expected ones. The surprise came because we saw, Zach Tom, I'm recording this on Thursday for a Thursday publish. We saw Zach Tom didn't practice Thursday. He's not playing. We saw Aaron Banks didn't practice Thursday. Probably don't expect him out there. Anthony Belton, your rookie second-round pick, who's supposed to be the reserve right tackle right now for Zach Tom, did not practice Thursday. So if you're without Tom at right tackle, his backup, you could be down to your 3rd stringer at right tackle in the form of Darian Kennard, who the Packers traded for right before the start of the season for, I think it was a 2027 6th that they gave to Philadelphia to get Kennard to get some depth, because you have Travis Glover out for the year and you have Jacob Monk on IR designated to return, but he's going to miss these first 4 games. You needed some depth on the offensive line. And now you really need it with these injuries. And I'm not giving Green Bay the crutch or the excuse of, the offensive line is beat up. They got to figure it out one way or another. And so if you're looking for that get-right spot, Cowboys fans will admit this. They won't want to, and I don't blame them. But right now, if you're a quarterback in an offense that needs a get-right spot, and Green Bay desperately needs that after what it did and showed against Cleveland last week, the best medicine you can take is facing this Cowboys defense. But the Cowboys might be looking at this, licking their chops a little bit, saying they're probably going to be on their 3rd string right tackle, their backup left guard, and Jordan Morgan, who was miserable last week against Cleveland when he played. And Dallas's defensive front is saying we might have Jadeveon Clowney making his debut, and he's a veteran. And what sort of long-term impact is he going to have on the season? I don't know. It's certainly not anywhere close to the impact Micah Parsons had for Dallas, not even in the same galaxy. But it can't be any worse, right? I think Dallas has 3 or 4 sacks total this year. They don't blitz much under Matt Eberflus. They're not getting pressure on the quarterback. Clowney isn't going to hurt anything. But it's a Dallas defensive front that might be looking at this matchup, salivating a little because of all the injuries Green Bay has. You're looking at Sunday, folks, Sunday night, and if we're going left to right on the offensive line for Green Bay, it could very well be Rasheed Walker, Jordan Morgan, who, again, major question mark right now. But that's probably your left guard on Sunday night. Elton Jenkins at center, who just said, I played like shit last week, talking about his performance against the Browns, and the PFF grades would reflect that he did indeed not play well. At right guard, you have Sean Ryan, and then at right tackle, you're down to your 3rd stringer and Darian Kennard. And so you're bruised and battered, but you got to figure it out. Every team's injured. The Cowboys aren't going to have CeeDee Lamb. That's huge. And so you have to figure it out. Just like Dallas is laying out a blueprint to not have CeeDee Lamb, to maybe have Deron Bland back, maybe have Diggs, who didn't practice Wednesday but was out there for the start of practice Thursday, the part that was available to the Dallas media. Every team's dealing with injuries. Dallas has injuries up front on its offensive line. And so you have to figure it out on the fly. But it was not good for Green Bay last week. Zach Tom's not going to play. Would be stunned if Aaron Banks played. Anthony Belton, a DNP on Thursday. It could be tough sledding for Green Bay, even against a matchup that looks advantageous against the Cowboys defense. And I'm not talking about the passing game, the running game specifically. I'm talking about just up front, winning in the trenches at the line of scrimmage. Green Bay, it is not a foregone conclusion that even with the injuries, they're going to easily win that battle against Dallas on Sunday night. They're going to have to show up. This week, I would say, for the Packers offense, whether it's justified or not, I think it's a narrative-setting week for the Packers offense. If you tear up this Dallas defense like everyone else has, including Russell Wilson and Caleb Williams, Russell Wilson had 450 yards and 3 touchdowns. Caleb Williams in 20 starts, probably his best start to date in his early young career in the NFL. He had 298 yards, 4 touchdowns, and for the first time in his career, was not sacked, not even once against Dallas. And so if you're the Packers, to me, this is a narrative-setting week for the offense. If you rip apart this Dallas defense to shreds like everyone else has, it's business as usual. Everything's fine in Packer land going into the bye. If you struggle with protection, if you don't hit on some big chunk plays, and this Dallas defense will allow plenty of them, if you score 20 points or less, there will be a lot of doubters entering the bye week, a lot of naysayers suggesting this team isn't as good as many thought after the first 2 games of the season. I tend to lean towards the side that they are more the team we saw against Detroit and Washington, but this Sunday night's going to tell us a lot about what we sort of need to know about this offense going forward. Can they pick themselves up off the mat and figure it out against a Dallas defense that is leaky at best? Again, we'll talk a little bit about the Dallas defense, but I really, really did a deep dive into it in the Eberflus-LaFleur video. If you watch that, I don't want to repeat numbers for the people that did see it. For those that didn't, still time to go watch it. I'm guessing you're watching this video before kickoff on Sunday. Dallas's defense, I'll give some other numbers and some other things to talk about. 125.3 is the passer rating allowed through 3 weeks for Dallas. That's 31st. And again, that came against Jalen Hurts, who really, before the second half last week against the Rams, the passing game for the Eagles, I mean, A.J. Brown had been non-existent, and they weren't really in sync at all in the passing game. But week 1, Dallas faced them. Week 2, they faced the Giants. And Russell Wilson's had more than just a cup of tea in the NFL. What is he, 35, 36 years old, been on multiple teams now, trying to bounce around, trying to cling on to some late career relevancy as a starting quarterback. He just got benched this week, but 2 weeks ago against Dallas, Russell Wilson had 450 yards, 3 touchdowns. And then Caleb Williams, I mentioned, had his best start to date in the NFL, 298 yards, 4 touchdowns, no picks, was not sacked once. And so it's not like this Dallas defense has gone up against Josh Allen, Joe Burrow, Lamar Jackson. It's not a knock on Hurts, Wilson, and Caleb Williams. And I know Philadelphia just won the Super Bowl, but it's not as though this Dallas secondary was going up against world beaters passing-wise. And they're still 31st in passer rating allowed through 3 weeks. They could be getting Deron Bland back this week. He was limited on Thursday. That would be huge for a secondary that's just been bad. And I mentioned a lot of the numbers I went through on my Eberflus-LaFleur video, so I don't want to just, regurgitate those and get repetitive. But there's a lot wrong with this Dallas defense. They've given up a league-high 5 touchdowns of 25 yards or more. They've given up 13 completions of 25 yards or more. They're 28th in sacks per game. They don't blitz. They play a lot of zone coverage. And it really seemed like there might have been some internal pressure for defensive coordinator Matt Eberflus to loosen up a little bit. I mean, you knew what you were getting in Matt Eberflus when you brought him in as defensive coordinator. And again, that's a guy who, how things ended with the Bears was so bad that he was the butt of all the jokes, right? He got ripped on relentlessly. But if you look at some of the defensive performances for Chicago last year, it was pretty good. It was the offense that couldn't do a damn thing. And, Matt Eberflus is the head coach, so he ultimately has to fall on that sword. But if we're, calling a spade, he's a defensive-minded head coach when he was a head coach. And the Chicago defense, before Eberflus was let go after the clock management fiasco, was that on Thanksgiving in Detroit? I think it was. The defense for the Bears wasn't too shabby at all. It was actually pretty good in a lot of games. But this year, it has been miserable in Dallas, and it's a Dallas defense that historically throughout the years, regardless of who's filtered in and out defensive coordinator, they play a lot more man than certainly what Eberflus brings to the table. And I do wonder if there was some internal pressure after how things went against Philadelphia, and certainly after how the defense looked against the Giants, although they won the game, the Cowboys, if there was some pressure to maybe implement a little more man coverage because they upped it in week 3 against Chicago. But the Cowboys had the same results being just not good, giving up big chunk plays, whether it was the flea flicker pass to Luther Bird, and there were other passes down the field, the 4th and goal completion to a wide open DJ Moore in the end zone. The Dallas defense they don't blitz, they can't get pressure on the quarterback, which is a bad recipe, a bad 2 ingredients to have. If you can't get pressure on the quarterback, and you certainly can't get it rushing 4, and you don't blitz, you're probably allowing the opposing quarterback to do whatever they want in a very clean pocket. And that's just been the case for the Cowboys this year. They don't generate a lot of pressure. They have 1 takeaway in 3 games. So it's not just like one box that you're checking where it's like, this is the problem with the Dallas defense. It's, well, they're giving up big chunk plays. They don't take it away. They don't get pressure on the quarterback. They're 28th in sacks. They give up massive big chunk plays in the passing game, 5 of which have resulted in touchdowns of 25 yards or more. And just like across the board, it's not good. And so I hope for the Cowboys fans' sake, because I can't imagine Cowboys fans are thinking this. I hope the Cowboys aren't looking at the Jadeveon Clowney signing as that's going to be the savior here. I don't think that story ends well if you're filling up Jadeveon Clowney's plate with the expectations of you're going to solve a lot of these problems. At this point in his career, Clowney's a good depth piece. He can start, but he's far more of a filler piece. And I don't want to, rip Jadeveon Clowney because he's still a productive player. But if you're expecting him to be a star, I think you're really, really stretching it out if you're Dallas. And I don't think, just based off what I've seen on social media, articles that I've read, I don't think Cowboy fans are under the impression that, like, oh, they signed Jadeveon Clowney. This is going to help immensely. This just saved everything. Inside that building, I hope that's not the expectation either. That, oh, we just got our guy. Everything's good now. Jadeveon Clowney will help, but he is not going to save would have been some, eye-opening, jaw-dropping problems for this Dallas defense. Getting Bland back, let me put it this way. And Cowboy fans, let me know if a lot of you might disagree with this. Getting Bland back for this matchup on Sunday night against this offense in Green Bay would be more important than Jadeveon Clowney making his debut. Because in his debut, still getting a grasp of the system, how things work under Eberflus. Do we expect some huge, massive game from Clowney? Probably not. Bland knows his role, knows his assignments. Obviously still in the first year of Eberflus, but could probably have a bigger impact on this game in trying to, put duct tape over some of the holes in the secondary than what Clowney can provide up front making his debut. So I would say Bland, to me, is the bigger addition this weekend than Jadeveon Clowney, if that makes sense. And then finally, I want to look at the Packers defense. And I'm going to tie something in with the Cowboys offense. I should have mentioned this when I talked about the Dallas offense. Mitch, I'm on YouTube. Please subscribe if you haven't already. Will the game be close enough? Because I got to look real quick. Last week, the Packers closed as 7.5-point favorites against Cleveland, which terrified me. I'd said 7.5. Any road team in the NFL playing any team on their home turf, that is a lot of points. You do not see too many road teams favored by 7.5 in an NFL game. And at the time of recording this and looking, Green Bay's a 6.5-point favorite on Sunday night against Dallas. That's a lot of points. One big question I have for the Cowboys offense: will this game be close enough, late enough, that the Cowboys can afford to stick with Javonte Williams? He's been really good. And he was good against Chicago, but he only finished with 10 carries for 76 yards because they were down so much they had to completely abandon the run. But Javonte Williams, and good for him because that dude's been through a couple gruesome injuries after a promising rookie year in Denver a few years back. Javonte Williams looks the part of the guy we saw in Denver early in his career. And you have to be happy for that guy because he's been through some gruesome injuries. But is Dallas going to be in a spot where it's a one-possession game? Maybe they're up one possession, down one possession. midway, later portions of the second half where they can say, hey, we can stick with the ground game. Like, we can keep implementing Javonte Williams, because to me he's been pretty good. And if you look at last week, Quinshon Judkins, rookie running back out of Ohio State for Cleveland, had 18 rushes for 94 yards and a touchdown. Cleveland's only touchdown. He didn't really get it going till the third quarter, but because the game was so close, Cleveland didn't have to abandon the run in the second half. And Judkins ripped off 2 big runs in those last 2 quarters against the Green Bay defense. And so I think one critical element of this for Dallas, going up against the Green Bay defense, going up against Jeff Hafley's unit, will it be close enough that they can stick with Javonte Williams? Because to me, if this game comes and goes, and let's say you didn't get to watch a second of it, and then you open up the box score, and the first stat line you look at is Dak Prescott's, you didn't watch a second of the game. You open up the box score, boom, Dak's numbers pop up. If on this game Sunday night, the first thing you see is Dak threw it 40 or more times, not good for the Cowboys. Not because of Dak Prescott, but because that, again, is a telltale sign that, Dallas dug themselves a deep hole, had no way of coming back outside of just throwing it all around the yard to try to get quick scores, generate big plays, things of that nature, completely abandoning the run. If Dak Prescott throws it 40 or more times on Sunday, great news for Green Bay, not good news for the Dallas Cowboys. Javonte Williams has been good, but the Cowboys dug themselves such a deep hole against Chicago, they had to ditch the run. And so I wonder what that looks like on Sunday, because to me that's a massive key. And it feels wrong to start this portion of the video when we're circling Packers defense and going through tidbits. It feels wrong to not lead with Micah Parsons. Like, it feels really like I buried the lead a little bit. Micah Parsons strikes me as a revenge guy, or a revenge will fuel him type of player, regardless of what he has said this week. He knows he wants this one. We know it. The Packers know it. The Cowboys know it. Jerry Jones certainly knows it. I did find, among many incredible stats with Micah Parsons leading into this game, I found one that I said, this is the one that really, really shows how freaking good this guy is. Why he is on the trajectory towards being not just a guy who's going to be an all-pro year in and year out, but a Hall of Fame type player. Digest this stat in its entirety, because to me it is truly incredible. You ready? Mitch, I'm on YouTube. Please click the subscribe button if you haven't already. It takes 3 seconds. Among all edge rushers this year, Micah Parsons has the highest pressure percentage at 21.8%. So among all edge rushers, nobody has gotten more consistent pressure on the opposing quarterback more often than Micah Parsons, 21.8%. Micah Parsons is also being double-teamed 18.4% of the time. Highest percentage in the league for any edge rusher. Think about that. Nobody is pressuring the quarterback on the edge more than Micah Parsons. No edge rusher is being double-teamed more than Micah Parsons. A truly incredible stat. No embellishment. Unbelievable. Among all edge rushers, Micah Parsons is pressuring the quarterback the most in the NFL. And you can say, well, yeah, that's not surprising. In a world where there is TJ Watt, Myles Garrett, other players, cut from that cloth, only a couple more, maybe one more cut from that cloth. It's not surprising to see Micah Parsons is top in pressure percentage. But to do it while also being double-teamed more than any other edge player in the NFL, that speaks volumes about how impactful Micah Parsons has been. Rashawn Gary right now is tracking to have the best year of his career. Rashawn Gary was a fine, good player, really good player. I think expectations, because of where he was drafted and because there was such a starving need in Green Bay for someone to really be that guy at defensive end, the expectations for Rashawn Gary were he should be an all-pro, and he hasn't quite gotten to that level in his career, but he's been really good. This year, entering week 4, Rashawn Gary leads the NFL with 4.5 sacks. Now, a lot of that is because Rashawn Gary's just really good. But if you ask Rashawn Gary, he'll tell you a lot of that is because number one is getting double-teamed, and Rashawn Gary is not getting double-teamed. And he is getting freed up early and often in these matchups week in and week out. First in the NFL in sacks entering week 4 with 4.5. Rashawn Gary right now tracking to have, it's early, After this week, we'll be about a fourth of the way through the season, but Rashawn Gary tracking to have the best year of his career. That's the Micah Parsons impact that you can't statistically measure, but you know it's there. Another thing, I mentioned the Cowboys blitz rate. What were they? I think were they 29th? I can't find the number. The Packers don't blitz much at all, and that was the case last year under Jeff Hafley. The Packers were 30th or 31st in blitz percentage last year. This year, Green Bay's 29th. Cowboys are right around there. Green Bay's 29th in blitz percentage so far this year, but the big difference, they don't have to blitz. Micah Parsons, Devontae Wyatt, Lucas Van Ness, Rashawn Gary, Carl Brooks, Colby Wooten. All those guys getting consistent pressure on the quarterback. Consistent pressures on the quarterback, hitting home more times than they did earlier at this stage last year. I would venture, if you asked most defensive coordinators, what is your top, dream scenario if you could pick like one little category, one little thing on your defense? If you could have this, what is your dream scenario? And I would venture right alongside just like leading the league in takeaways, a 1 and 1A, a lot of defensive coordinators would say, if we can get consistent pressure only having to rush 4, it opens up everything for us. And they would say that is the top thing I would circle. Green Bay, blitz percentage, 29th in the NFL. They just don't do it that much. They didn't do it last year that much under Jeff Hafley in his first year. This year, it was a point of emphasis all offseason. You saw Goody hype up Lucas Van Ness, former first-round pick out of Iowa. He said, we're expecting big things from Van Ness this year. And it was like, there's going to be a lot of expectations on him. Big year, third year, first 2 years, very underwhelming. Lucas Van Ness has been pretty good. Lucas Van Ness is also lined up on the interior this year because they got that dude from Dallas, Micah Parsons. It helps out everything on your defense. It has a huge ripple effect on what your defense can do having that guy, Micah Parsons. They don't need to blitz. Dallas is stuck defensively in a spot where we can't get pressure rushing for. Eberflus doesn't like to blitz. What the hell do we do? Green Bay's in a spot where they're like, we don't blitz that much. We're really good with that because we're getting plenty of pressure just bringing 4. And it's a very comfy, cozy spot to be in if you're Jeff Hafley. I will say one tidbit as we finish up here. Got to find a way to get more takeaways. Dallas is tied for second, behind only Cincinnati with 6 giveaways this season on offense. McKinney had the pick last week at the end of the first half, and he should have batted it down, but he had the pick at the end of the first half of Joe Flacco. Evan Williams had a pick on a beautiful read. Goff was looking for Amon-Ra St. Brown, slot right week 1, late in the first half in the Green Bay red zone. It was a huge play for Evan Williams. But, all off-season training camp, you're seeing these videos of the Packers just going with that peanut punch, trying to punch the ball out, having success doing it here and there. Haven't seen that yet this year. They need to generate more takeaways and start stacking them like they did a year ago. Dallas tied for second most giveaways this year. Kind of lines up in a spot for Green Bay to maybe get 2 this weekend. Maybe I'm trying to bite off more than they can chew, but we'll see. Final thoughts. Dallas needs to control the clock. They need to have a healthy balance of run-pass and find a way to force a turnover or two themselves to win this game on Sunday. If they do that, I think this game will be up for grabs. And am I asking for a lot? I don't know. Dallas fans would have to tell me. Again, I'm saying you need to control the clock. You need to have a healthy balance of run-pass because Javonte Williams has been really good, and if Dak's thrown over 40 times, it's because you're playing from far behind. And then your defense that has not taken it away either this year, hardly at all, needs to find a way to generate 1 or 2. Love had the pick. Josh Jacobs had it punched out in the fourth quarter on that final drive. Thankfully for Green Bay, he dove back on, and then, of course, the field goal ended up getting blocked anyways. But Dallas needs to find a way to churn out a takeaway or 2. If you're Green Bay, you need to trust that last week was a one-off and lean into the belief that this Cowboys defense is nowhere close to the defense you saw last week in Cleveland. You need to tell yourself that because it's there. It's evident on video. It's evident on paper. And it's not in an arrogant way if you're the Packers. Like, you can't stroll into Dallas and expect the defense for Matt Eberflus to just roll over and be like, here you go. Or just roll out a red carpet and be like, go ahead, put up 34+ like you have each of your last 5 visits to Jerry World against us. That's not going to happen. Dallas isn't going to roll over in a standalone primetime matchup when you know Jerry Jones and the Cowboys want this one going up against Micah Parsons. But if you're Green Bay, I'm merely saying if you're Green Bay's offense, Don't expect them to roll over because they won't. But you need to believe that there will be plenty of opportunities for plays to be made on offense because there will be. And then you just need to execute them. I am imagining a world where if Dallas wins this game against the Packers, against Micah Parsons, what are people going to be saying Monday, locally and nationally, about Jerry Jones? What is Jerry Jones going to say? It should be a pretty fun one. Let me know what you guys and gals think. Always appreciative of all the support. Packers, Cowboys, final thoughts, Sunday Night Football. We'll see you after the game for instant reaction.